Welcome to Mindfulness Manufacturing. My name is Trevor Blondeel. Spending 25 years in manufacturing, I discovered the real impact we have on turnover, communication, and the ability to manage change is how we show up. That's the essence of emotional intelligence. In each episode, we bring a guest or message to expand your skills, engage your people, and grow your organization. So let's jump in. In manufacturing, we like our production process to run all the time. That's kind of the idea, to utilize the equipment. So we like to have great reliability. And when equipment breaks down, we like to do like a root cause analysis and find out what's wrong. When I first got into this, it looked very scientific, very data driven. And there's a reason the podcast is called Mindfulness, because humans are involved in every aspect of manufacturing. And recently, with the community of human and organizational learning, I got to become friends with Bob Latino. And Bob's family in 1972 founded and directed the Reliability Center Incorporated. And welcome to the show, Bob.
Wow, thanks for having me, Trevor. It was really fun to come across you. And in case I use that term, the community of human and organizational learning, we'll shorten that and just call it co-learning. So we use all those words.
Right on. I could go on and on about your experience, but we're going to get right into the conversation. You've been in this business, your career, Bob, your family has. I've got to know you and just the information, reading an article from your father from the 70s that I thought was written yesterday. And just diving into this human element, which I did not expect to get from you when I first met. I thought, okay, here's this reliability expert. And then you and I connected right away on just around good people sometimes making inappropriate decisions. And that phrase came from you. And I was like, oh, I like this guy already. How does that tie into reliability, Bob?
Well, I think a lot of the cases, people's perception of what root cause analysis means is RCA has a PR problem. It's because it's mostly associated with the physics of failure, of things that break. And it's not associated. A lot of times 5 whys is associated as the tool to use for doing an appropriate RCA. But when my father had started that group, it was a research and development arm, a corporate one for a chemical conglomerate at the time called Allied Chemical, which is Honeywell today. And his research revolved around equipment, process, and human reliability, and doing the human and organizational side of failure. But most people associate failure with the physics of things that break, and I'll admit, some of your best friends in this business should be metallurgists. You should really cozy up to really good metallurgists. But we have to understand that it doesn't stop at the physics of failure. It doesn't stop with broken parts. There will inevitably be errors of omission or commission by human beings. Good people will make bad decisions at any given time. And if we use that as a chance to blame people, you'll probably do very little real RCA because nobody will help you anymore. A progressive, forward-thinking leadership will question deeper and want to know deeper as to why did that person on that day think that it made sense to make that decision. And that's really where the meat is. And I think if you stop at the physics of failure, you're essentially doing a shallow cause analysis as opposed to a root cause analysis. Because unless your goal is to understand why people made the decision they did, then we're not going to be able to stop that behavior in the future. And when you look at trying to get, when somebody goes to work and they feed their family with that check. I mean, I don't go to work and say, I'm really going to make bad decisions today. I really don't want to equipment to run. So, they usually will make those decisions with the best of intention. And then we have to find out, what did right look like? What would have been the right thing to do? And when you look at that, and that's where the co-learning comes into play and that's what attracted me to them was, I did primarily live in the physics world of broken stuff, but they connected me to the social science side. and being able to understand through better interviewing and questioning without being like an interrogation, but more a conversation. And you'll find out that people made those, that anybody else, even us, would have made the same decision that they did. Given the circumstances, if we strive to understand the circumstances, they could be following the procedure, but nobody's questioning that the procedure is obsolete. And how come we didn't have a review mechanism? We changed the technology. We never changed the procedure. We never trained the person in how to do a new procedure for a new technology. We went ahead and we changed vendors of parts because they were cheaper, and it wasn't a like-for-like part. So, maybe we changed the lubricant and all of a sudden stuff is failing because I'm using the same out of the same can I was before. And now all of a sudden nobody told me that you had switched, and we're going failures and they're blaming me. So, blame, I'm not going to be one of those who say that we can never blame. Well, blame should not be your go-to. There's a difference between blame and accountability. If I've been given all the tools to do things right, and I might have been distracted from something off of work or, something of that nature, but just to stop for a checklist and say, we're going to make this thing go away, that head's got to roll. It'll never happen again.
That's a lot to unpack there. Because right now I'm writing my book, and a chunk of that is like judgment is poison, right? And it's in us. Like we can't get rid of it because we are hardwired to judge others. It just comes into our mind. We can't control our thought. What we can do is just be self-aware of that. So how do you get people, Bob, to get out of that whole answer of, well, hold on, let's check the training records, because if they signed off on it, then we should write them up, right? Or we do write them up, and then we don't even question the thinking. We just say, well, yeah, I want to show that I'm a good leader. I want to have some accountability here. We got to make sure that these procedures are followed. So Bob, here's your verbal warning, and make sure you follow this next time, all without asking a question. So how are you seeing leaders in manufacturing change their thinking around this topic?
I think leaders have to understand. I've had a lot of friends, I'm in an older group now, and we came to the realization that if you've never experienced reliability, then it's like a unicorn world. If you live in crisis management and a place where I go to work on every day and I say, well, don't worry about a schedule because I'm going to work on what breaks today, and I got it's whack-a-mole maintenance.
Yeah.
But if you come from a reliability world where you've seen it work, it can exist. And I could hypothesize all over the place about elements that in my opinion, having been this is my actual 40th year in this business.
Congratulations.
I'm saying it go backwards. I just don't see the emphasis on proaction, but I see more and more organizations where people are just trying to fix things faster. And there's not, I don't blame analysts that do poor RCAs as much as I do the people that accept them. So unless you know how to, very few managers know how to assess the quality of a good RCA. And until they start asking those questions about why did you stop at the broken part, or why did you blame this individual? Did we seek to peel the onion a little deeper? Until you start getting that progressiveness, it's likely not going to happen. And if you're wired to be a proactive person and you're in a reactive environment, it's going to frustrate the hell out of you. But one thing I can tell you is, I've seen it so many times, is that when people come out of the military, where you have a very disciplined background and training, some of the best in the world, then you go out and you work at a paper mill, or you work in a 100-year-old aluminum. And these places, they don't have the discipline of the military aircraft or a tank or anything like that. And it's predictable that they're not going to last there because they're used to having the systems in place to support their behaviors, and they're very proactive in that sense.
So what's going to make the shift then, Bob? Like if I'm driving into work today, I'm working in a manufacturing plant, I'm like, yeah, Bob's talking about our place. We do a lot of fixing, and we get rewarded for that behavior. Because there's two ways you can approach this, is that, hey, if I'm a leader in an organization with this environment and I'm driving my car to the plant today, what's a couple questions I should be asking that maybe I'm not asking to shift the conversation? You mentioned a good one, which we're going to put in the show notes, which is, what led you to make that decision at that time? What are other good questions to ask, Bob?
I can, and again, I'll credit this to my learning from the coal community, is that asking the question, And instead of why did you do this and why didn't you follow the rule that we gave you training, why don't you just simply ask them, what does right look like? So if you think about how you have to answer that, I'm not being accusatory. I'm saying, given hindsight now, is say, if you had to do it again, what would right look like? And I think that you'll find in the predominance of cases, they don't know what right looks like because it's a moving target. Is that they adapt and they're resilient to the way that the operation moves. And that they've, you could say people violate the procedure all the time. And, when anybody's time pressure to do anything, they're going to take a shortcut. When you take that shortcut and nothing bad happens, you've eroded the standard of whatever that procedure was. And that becomes the Texas City report from the explosion of 2005. I love I use it in all my classes, the caption. Well, it was the last sentence and the foreword from Baker in the Baker report. It says that people forget to be afraid. So when you, in that case, are saying that when you continually violate the procedure and nothing bad happens, and I keep eroding it because it's the boiling frog kind of concept, when that continues to happen, that we unknowingly go into an unsafe zone. Because you think about that, your procedures are written and risk assessments are based on that static operation. They're not based on the human organizational performance groups would call the blue line, which is the difference between work is imagined and work is done. The work is done is that blue line. It's all over the place. And that we have to continually in the field adapt to that. There's no way you can write a procedure that will cover every eventuality that could occur. And if you write your procedures too tight, you'll have more failures than you can think of because every procedure's got to have the ability to use judgment because you're not going to be able to capture the combination of variables that could happen.
Yeah. What did right look like at the time?
Because depending on how they answer that will be my next line of questioning, right? Because if they didn't know what right looked like, that's very telling to me and is different than if they knew what right looked like and deviated from it.
Yeah, because there could be missing information that we didn't know because we weren't there at the time. And one of the gaps that we talk about is the expectation gap, really the space between what was expected and what did I believe was expected. And is there a gap there? So we can learn a lot, but finding out of what were you expect at that time.
And it's funny to watch these, sometimes the marriages faces when these things happen. And now it's gotten the visibility and, the suits have shown up and now people are puckered up and they're going, but when you delve into why people were doing what they were doing, they've always been doing it that way. There wasn't just a new variable that day, but the reason that they had that behavior is because it's been condoned in the past. It's not only them. I bet you the other people in other shifts have been doing the same thing, and managers watch them because it's working and they're getting productivity because they've taken those shortcuts. But the first time, it's the hypocrisy is they go ahead and something bad happens on the 100th time that they did it. And now all of a sudden, everybody's acting surprised.
Yeah, I guarantee you, there are listeners right now saying, "Oh my goodness, Bob's been in our plant."
Yeah,
right.
My business over that career has been, I've been in heavy manufacturing a long time, but I spent 20 years doing this in hospitals. I've done this for Homeland Security. I do it for wide packages or UPS. The common denominator here is the human being. It's not, I could care less what an undesirable outcome is in that industry because the way that you think it through is going to be the exact same no matter what the industry is or whatever that bad outcome is. The key is understanding the difference between drilling down and discovering physical, human, and latent or systemic root causes. That, if you stop short and you just identified failed parts, you haven't identified the systems that led up to those failed parts getting in or what we did to the parts in the field.
You mentioned earlier, Bob, about that you see the trend in manufacturing or hospitals or just reliability and root cause analysis not really getting better. So let me ask you, what does good look like in a company that is changing their ways? Like the companies that you've worked with that have really grasped on and you've seen them go from just reacting and not asking those questions to asking those questions. What's the difference between the companies that make the change that you work with and the companies that don't?
The difference between controlling the fix and having the fix control you. That's the difference between flow action and reaction. I see so many companies and everybody wants reliability. Nobody knows what it is, but everybody wants it. I can't tell you how many places I go into where they change the maintenance engineer's title to reliability engineer, but they don't change its function. So, if you're charged with as a maintenance and reliability engineer, maintenance is a today function, which deals with reaction. Reliability is supposed to be traditionally a tomorrow function. The reliability engineering people are supposed to be looking out and doing all that predictive and that preventive and the RCAs and the RCMs and the risk analyses. That's what their job is. But if I have to look out, if I have to be responsible for failures, I'll never get tomorrow's stuff done.
Okay, that is helpful, because if I look at most of the maintenance teams that I've worked with, the same person was wearing two hats, right? And the fact of, hey, it's down, can you come out here and help? And then, by the way, what's the plan that our downtime's going to increase or our cycle time's going to increase? We're not going to, to stop the cycle time creep or whatever that is, versus, hey, can you just reduce cycle time today and change out that robot?
It's a very short term window because you're just doing it day by day. And, to try, that's the first thing to get broken is your PM schedule, is that when the unexpected happens, they go ahead and you stop your PMs, or you break them. And then all of a sudden you have a failure because you didn't do the PMs. And then people are wondering, well, why didn't we do the PMs? Well, it was a low priority.
Yeah. And then you get in the whole debate of, well, what's the impact of the PMs? Are they the right PMs? And I've been in those conversations, and those sometimes can get into a very downward spiral and not really make us better.
Back in the 70s, and I've told the story numerous times, but when my father was setting that up as a corporate R&D group, they didn't know where to put it on the organizational chart. So, because they never had a reliability department, nobody had. So naturally, they wanted to put it subordinate to maintenance. And he said, you'd be wasting your time and you don't understand reliability if you're going to put reliability subordinate to maintenance. He said, because for that reason of today people and tomorrow people, they have to be isolated from each other. Is that for reliability people to get their job done, they can't be chasing failures every day. So that they need to be working on that risk reduction side. Essentially maintenance works on consequences and reliability people work on risk. So if we're better at the RCMs and we're better at doing the criticality analysis and we're better at setting up strategies, that's to prevent the consequences from materializing. But if I'm out there and I just keep getting, it always amazes me too, is the mechanics who get pats on the back for, it used to take 4 hours to fix it. And I got this guy a hat, says embroidered hat. It says, it only took me 2 hours to fix it. I'm a hero, but nobody's questioning why the hell they're getting so much practice. Why should you be getting that good at fixing it?
Okay. So that's the big question. So I'm going to try to guess to answer it, and then I want you to give the right answer. So when I ran plants and been part of great manufacturing companies, we didn't really have that segregation. At least I didn't in my mind, and I wasn't leading in a thoughtful way. And then we see the stress in manufacturing. We see lower levels of engagement, higher levels of turnover, and then just stress levels, right? When equipment's breaking down and people are panicky. Now people do thrive in that because, hey, I stayed 12 hours and buy a steak dinner.
Like an ER, right?
Like, look, we saved another patient. But there isn't so many celebrations on, look at the reliability that we've built into this, and we're not having as much. So I was talking to a manager of a factory that was taking over and trying to make some decisions and looking at past leaders of this plant. And it seems like there's a pattern of a lot of the decisions are being made of, hey, I got to make sure that this plant runs good for the next year, versus like, I want to make sure this plant and the people coming through it becomes a magnet of people wanting to work here because they learn about different areas. He didn't use the word reliability. But what I'm picturing is it sometimes a leader at the top, and are they being pushed for next quarter's results versus the integrity of the company over the next 3 years?
Well, post-COVID has been really different. Because it's really hard to have a reliable operation when you don't have a reliable staff. When you have the turnover, the continual turnover, and if I'm looking at leadership, and just again, this is my experience at the mill or plant manager level and direct reports, they're usually at a place 1 to 3 years. So if you're trying to institutionalize reliability, you're not going to be interested in doing that. because you're not going to reap the rewards of institutionalizing that because you're not going to be there. And that makes it very hard to build that in. A lot of this is going to get worse because the boomers are heading out. And, we've seen this coming for 20 years about all of that void of talent and expertise that's just going to leave. So, the reliability is an issue from that standpoint of even trying to, because we're not good at institutionalizing it. When we go ahead and we fix things and we move on, and then when you let your top problem solver just retire, and then, he's got alcohol sort of brain with all that talent in it. He's on a beach somewhere. He's on a beach somewhere. It's a big challenge. And it's been made worse since COVID.
I can see that with people changing, right? If people are going to change, and they will, then your culture, which is really your daily behaviors, isn't just how we work here at this plant, right? Like, we have a segregation. We understand what reliability is. We have a focus on it. We have a long-term goal. We want to make sure that people are wanting to come work here. And if people leave here, they get promoted. And then people there's a lineup to get in here because we've kind of institutionalized this way of thinking. And yes, we have breakdowns, but we also focus and celebrate on being reliable. And when things do go well and they don't break down, it's a different culture. It's a different mindset. And Bob, I need about 10 more hours with you and take you with me to a few plants because this is a lot of information. So for our listeners, they're walking into the plant. They just heard this conversation with you. What do you want them to take into the plant that day, this day that they're listening? What do you want them to remember about you, your father, this whole legacy?
I think if you take it away, like I said, if you look at reliability from a systems standpoint and not the industry, is that every organization is a system. I have an input, I have a transformation of some kind, and I have an output. And when you have undesirable outcomes, you will solve those in the same cause and effect, evidence-based manner, no matter what industry that you're in. You just have to have my father used to call it to be bold and a little bit outrageous. He used the words a little bit so he didn't get fired for doing it. I mean, he was they call it a disruptor now, but think how hard people have this right now, 50 years later. And like you said, I purposely put his article from 1972 out there, and I didn't tell people that it was written 50 years ago. And it could have been, it's representative of today. And I think that in general, I would encourage you to look beyond blame and seek to understand what made sense. Something that day when that person made that decision and you understand the environment that they were working in, is that it made sense at that time. And if you have the will to do it, it would probably make sense to you too. So I just, it's a dignity, it's a trust, it's a respect thing. And if your RCAs end on that note, people know that you're looking, because that's kind of like looking in a mirror. If I'm a manager and I'm looking at management systems, I'm admitting that my role as the overseer of these systems played a contributing factor in this, whatever the undesirable outcome is. So it's easy to go ahead and point the finger at somebody else, but we have to, the only time we're going to make progress in reliability is if we look at ourselves as part of the problem.
Starts with us. Look out with, my favorite saying is stay curious, curious about ourselves, curious about others, curious of like, what did right look like and what would right look like now? Oh my goodness. Blow my mind, Bob, when I talk to you. How do the listeners follow you, Bob, and keep upgrading this concept from 50 years ago that we're still trying to elevate today?
Well, my family sold that company in 2019. So it's just me and my younger brother. Got the little company called Relical.com. And that'll be posted up somewhere, but it's blending the practical and reliability together with that. And you have to be living under a rock not to find me on LinkedIn. I spend a fair amount of my time on LinkedIn, and I think I got 80 some papers there. And I got 8 or 10 books on the topic between healthcare and industry.
Bob, thanks for coming on the show, sharing with our listeners. On LinkedIn, you can hit someone's bell in the top corner of their profile. And when they post or repost, you'll get information that, hey, this person's been active and has something to share. And so I get something from Bob every day now. And I really do appreciate it. I think you've helped me think a little bit different around how we show up and this whole disconnect from the top of the shop. And, reliability is a piece of it. But I just respect the fact that, even 50 years ago, it was equipment, process, and humans.
Yeah.
And even today, we can't take those humans out with all the AI. So much, Bob.
Thanks for the opportunity, Trevor.
Hey, folks, appreciate you taking the time to join us today. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone. Haven't subscribed yet? Do it now. Remember, if you want results, the key is increasing your awareness of how you show up.